Okay, dear students and viewers, after a long time, I have just returned to this channel. But now I am giving the assurance that in future, I will be regular on this channel. And I have decided to start various programs. For example, critical opinion series, present and the past communication series, as well as the examination guideline series. Apart from that, I have decided on every week on this channel, not by me exactly, but by my assistant, on every week, there's some important current issues, not in the manner which are fashion in today. Normally you will find different on different channels. For example, if I have to deal with the Xi Jinping in China, so I am having a different view about the current affair. I should not make me confined to simply the issue of China. Rather, I have tried to be regular, and I have always tried to link the present and the past so that through the prism of past, present would be more clear to my audience, and with the support of the present, even the past will attain some new meaning. It is on this basis I have decided this program in future. I will give you the announcement from which one date. On every week you will find India and the world this week. This will be the name of my program, and every week you will find how did the general studies travel in this week particularly. I'm inviting you to Hindi channel as well, because I will run both the channels simultaneously. Some of you, if you are just bilingual, you can be benefited from both the programs simultaneously, and you are cordially invited on Hindi channel as well. Recently, I have formulated 2 different lectures on Hindi channel. One lecture is on the current issue, that is Cuba Missile Crisis. Another is yesterday, that is the National Unity Day, and in commemoration of the birthday of Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man of India. So there also I have given the specific focus over the achievements of Vallabhbhai Patel. You can be benefited from this lecture as well. Now come to the topic, my students and viewers. What is my title? Present and the Past Communication Series. English medium, the Chinese version of Communism and Xi Jinping. The Chinese model of Communism and Xi Jinping, as I have told you earlier, in different magazines, journals, on different TV channels, you will find the program, how did Xi Jinping emerge to be a very strong man in China? How did the 20th session of the CPC, means Chinese Communist Party, has changed the political scenario of China? How did it change the political scenario of China? And how did Xi Jinping emerge to be the second Mao, etc., etc. But my students, I have come to realize that the present scenario is the one thing. But so far as you are not having some knowledge of historical context, you will not do justice to either the policy of Xi Jinping, or you can say the history of China. So that's why I will carry you to the, you can say, waves of history. I will carry you to the, past of China and try to explore history. And on that basis, I have to give focus over the achievements and limitations of Xi Jinping as the president and, the secretary of Communist Party in China. Now, just observe here, when the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of China was in session, so Xi Jinping almost concentrated all the powers into his hand. Here I have given you certain points you can give focus over. The first one, total control on Central Committee. Xi Jinping presently was having the total control over the Central Committee. You might have watched in the TV channel, or you might have read in the news how Li Keqiang, who used to be the Prime Minister earlier, he was almost removed from his post, and Hu Jintao, who used to be his predecessor, and Hu Jintao, once the president and the ex-president and the ex-Communist Party of China, ex-secretary of the Communist Party of China. He attended the session, but he was unceremoniously ousted from the session. When he was physically weak, the pretext was he was physically weak, he was unable to attend the session for a longer time. But truth is that two, you can say, persons just came and taking his armpit into their hand and carried him away from the session. So it became a matter of controversy among the journalists as well as the intellectuals whether Hu Jintao has been consciously put out from the scene, of whatever might be the reason. So in this way, he consolidated his power. Today, you can say, just like Mao Zedong, no other leader could give a challenge to his position. It was very illustrious situation because earlier, you can say, after Mao Zedong, whether it might be Deng Xiaoping or Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao, they could never enjoy such a consolidated power as you find in case of this Xi Jinping. Second one point is removal of all the rivals. When whosoever was not in tune with his policy, and whosoever means the party member who was not in tune with his policy was simply dropped out from the post and the party. And the third one is acceptance of socialist thought of Xi as official Chinese ideology. It is not a matter of surprise that today what you know as the socialist ideology, so socialist ideology of and socialist thought of Xi Jinping or the Xi Jinping, that became the official ideology of Communist Party of China. Just it is the reminiscent of the so-called the Cultural Revolution, which had earlier been organized by a strong man of China, that was Mao Zedong, which I will discuss with you later. In this way, you can say he could impose even his official ideology, socialist thought, as his official ideology. Today, this Mao Zedong or Mao Zedong was everything in China. He was the General Secretary of Communist Party, he was the President of China. And apart from that, he was even the head of and the supreme commander of the army as well, that is PLA, So in this way, he was now uncontested in China. But this is the one side of the picture, my students and viewers. If today I have to come here simply to inform you what Xi Jinping is and in what way Xi Jinping organized and concentrated the power into his hand, so I could not have been present here to deliver you the lecture. I have come here to deliver the lecture on the historical background of Xi Jinping. How did Xi Jinping emerge to be the strong man in China, and how did Xi Jinping or the rise of Xi Jinping give a very, dangerous signal to China and the world? In what way his rise might affect the Chinese and world politics in future. So please pay attention to the past. We need to dig the past and explore history of China so that we can better understand why did the rise of Xi become an alarming signal to China and the world. We have to explore history of China. So from where to start now? I'm going to start here. You'll find that the two terms, Marxism and Communism. Marxism and Communism. Marxism and Communism. To my enlightened audience and viewers, the two terms may be slightly mind-boggling. What is difference and what difference lay between Marxism and Communism, or both are just synonym for each other. Here I have to make you clear that unfortunately in history, Marxism and Communism came to be synonym for each other, but both are having the different meanings or at least different context. In one sense, you can say Marxism was a political theory. Marxism was a means, and communism was the consequence of this political theory, or communism was the end. For example, here I have to inform you, you will find a term socialism and Marxism. let me clarify these two terms first, then I will just come to Marxism and Communism. If someone is going to ask you what difference and what similarity lies between communism and Marxism, you will simply reply, sorry, Marxism and socialism, you will simply reply, if socialism is Indian, then Marxism is either Punjabi, Bengali, Bihari, UPI, whatever may be. Means here you can say that socialism is a very larger unit. It was the larger unit, and Marxism is simply a part of it. The Marxism is lying within the boundary of socialism itself. Socialism means the communal control over, and you can say collective control over the means of production and consumption. But main difference lay ki what should be the method to have the control over the means of production and distribution. So you will find here that different methods have been imparted by different sorts of scholars. Initially, there appeared some, some moderate-minded scholars, you can say the middle-class scholars, who preferred to bring the changes or who advocated the control over the means of production and consumption through the method of class collaboration or through the friendship or through give and take between the two parties. So, but later Karl Marx came to characterize them. Karl Marx you have heard about. He was a great thinker of 19th century and he was a great revolutionary and his ideas were far ahead of his time. So Karl Marx declared these thinkers as utopian. Utopian means excessive idealistic, and not simply excessive idealistic, but even, the better term is impractical or unpragmatic thinker. About these thinkers, Karl Marx has coined the term. Then came Marxism. Marxism just talked about, advocated for the change through a blood revolution. Through a bloody conflict and blood revolution, Karl Marx advocated for the change, and he was talking in terms of the dictatorship of proletariat class. Karl Marx coined the term bourgeoisie and proletariat. Bourgeoisie for capitalist class or the middle class, and proletariat for industrial workers. So Karl Marx always preferred the bloody revolution, and particularly he made an announcement about the revolution in his famous text or the magnum opus you might have heard about, Communist Manifesto, which along with Angels he composed in 1848. So that is known as Marxism. Now, my students and viewers, you may ask me the question whether communism, socialism and Marxism difference is clear. Socialism is a larger unit. Socialism comprises of Marxism as well as utopian socialism both. But so far as the question of the difference between Marxism and communism is concerned, here I have to inform you that in fact Karl Marx has conceived about the three different stages of the revolution. As the first stage of revolution, he talked about the direct action. At the second one stage, he talks about and he advocated for the dictatorship of proletariat class. According to Karl Marx, in the first stage, what he called proletariat class, he will organize the workers and made an attack over the system, capture the power. So the first stage of the revolution would be over. Then comes the second stage. For that, he coined the term dictatorship of proletariat class. Dictatorship of proletariat class means ki among the workers whom you call proletariat, so they will capture the power, and after capturing the power, they had to establish the dictatorship, and through using the same state machinery which had once bourgeois class used against them, using the same administrative machinery, they had to eliminate the bourgeois class completely. Elimination does not mean killing or assassination. Please, here elimination simply means that their private property had to be eliminated, and once the private property would be annihilated, so after losing the private property, the bourgeoisie will come in the status of proletariat. There was a natural transformation of bourgeois class into proletariat. So according to Karl Marx, this was the theory, So this was the second one stage. But here Karl Marx also prescribed the export of revolution to different areas by proletariat class during the second stage. So this ideas of revolution had to be spread to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Russia, whatever may be the region. For example, you can say if the workers captured the power in India, so this workers class, or what whom Marx called proletariat class, so this proletariat class will export the revolution in other areas. So in the other parts of the world, there would be the direct action by workers and the same stage, that is the dictatorship of proletariat class. So the second stage of revolution would be completed. So in every part of the world, there would be the dictatorship of proletariat class, and bourgeois class had to be eliminated completely, had to be uprooted. So after the elimination and uprooting of bourgeois class, there would be a single class in the world, and that would be proletariat class, and there would be the single state in the world, and that will be the state by proletariat class. So Marx prefers to call this phase as a stateless and classless society. So this stateless and classless society symbolized communism, when the private property had completely to be eliminated, and there would be egalitarian society, and man would enjoy unlimited freedom. So this is the third one stage you know as communism, but this communism could never come into existence. This proved Marx's utopia. And in Marxian utopia, Karl Marx propounded about the third stage of revolution, but it simply remained on the paper. So my students and viewers, here I have to inform you that this was the difference between Marxism and communism. But I have realized, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever may be, I think a better term is unfortunately, this present generation of my audience and students, so they could not manifest Marxism, because Marxism came into existence much earlier than even my birth, you can say. This was much earlier, in the beginning of 20th century. But I was the eyewitness about the demise of communism or Marxism in the world, because in 1990s its demise started, and finally you can say it has almost been eliminated in the world. I am recalling that there was a time कि nearly 22 countries were communist countries in the world, but now their number has reduced to 5 only. You can very well imagine that today the number of these communist or Marxist countries are few and far between. They are simply symbolically, and particularly even these 5 communist or Marxist countries could not maintain their Marxist or communist economy. Rather, they preferred a capitalist model of economy, and there was the partial transition between socialism to communism even in those countries, at the glaring example of China itself. So in true sense, today it is very difficult to characterize any country as the communist or the Marxist country. Anyway, my point is, here I have to focus over particularly the evolution of Chinese communism or Chinese Marxism or Chinese socialism. So I am going to pay attention to this particular phenomena in China. Karl Marx has propounded a theory, and that is called Marxism, you know. And rather, you can say even the term communism came into use for this particular term, like Marxism, you know. But Karl Marx died broken-hearted. In spite of his best of the efforts, he could not successfully organize revolution any part in the world. And when in 1883 Karl Marx died, at that time, socialist government could be formed in not even a single country. So he died broken-hearted in one sense. And why did Karl Marx turn to a failure? There were two reasons. One was that Karl Marx himself was not an activist. Rather, you can say he was basically an ideologue. So he was cut off from the reality of life. So he could not ordain what would be the exact method of the revolution. This was the one factor. Second one factor was given Karl Marx could not understand the resilience of capitalism. Capitalist country or capitalist model was having the particular resilience, as well as it was having adaptability. It could adapt itself to the new situation, and it could save itself from the wrath of the working class through providing or extending different sorts of economic support to the working class. Karl Marx had never conceived earlier that capitalism could change its behavior in this way. So these are the two factors. And anyway, you can say that much after Karl Marx, one of his disciples, Vladimir Lenin, he could successfully organize a revolution in Soviet Russia, which was basically a country of peasants rather industrialists, because industrialization has already started in Russia. But in Russia, in one sense, you can see industrialization was having the very limited impact. In one sense, you can say that Russia was a country of the giant size, and the very country of the very formidable shape. But in the certain pockets, the impact of industrialization was visible. Anyway, Vladimir Lenin might have organized a revolution in Russia, but you will compare the method of Lenin with that of Marx, you will come to realize that no, Lenin was definitely adopted a radically different method which had earlier been prescribed by Karl Marx. Means that his method was different from that of Karl Marx. Karl Marx was talked about the revolution of proletariat class, but it was through tactical measures and with the support of the organized, guerrillas or organized volunteers. Lenin could make attack on the system and capture the power. It was not in true sense a proletariat revolution. Rather, a group of the volunteers of Bolshevik party could impose its rule on Russia. In this way, the first communist country or Marxist country emerged in Russia, and the world was a witness to it. And you might have heard a very famous proverb कि खरबूजे को देखकर ही खरबूजा रंग पकड़ता है. Once communist movement became successful in Russia, it attracted the intellectuals as well as volunteers all over the world. So from different regions, you can say intellectuals were attracted towards the communist model. You will just observe the history of China. China was having a different history. I think very few countries might have witnessed or observed such ups and downs in the whole of its national career, which had been faced by China itself. For example, China used to be a great country in ancient. It was one of the ancient and most prosperous civilizations in the world, Then China emerged to be a very giant country after Russia, and population-wise, it was the largest, and size-wise, it was just second to Russia, But in spite of the fact, you will come to realize that China could not modernize itself, and particularly in middle age, it developed a sense of complacency. We are the middle country. My king is just like the divine king, and China started to make a claim of the divine right of kingship. Even if the Western powers, Western European companies started to knock at its door, so China could not respond properly, and China was still lying in a state of complacency. The Western world is much inferior to the China, and China was having a sense of feel great factor. So he could not pay attention seriously towards the threat from the West at that time. And then happened, you might have heard about Opium War. How did Britain first impose a war on China? And China was defeated and humiliated by Britain first, and then other European and Western countries rushed to humiliate China. So one by one, they started to take a lot of concessions from China, and a time will come that China was just like a python and ajgar, and they were giving the slogan ki cut off Chinese melon, chini kharbuje ko kato. They gave the slogan. So China was on the verge of getting collapse, and thus started the century of humiliation for China. China from time to time reacted against the Western model. For example, Taiping Rebellion. Then came the turn of Boxer Revolt in 1899, 1900. And finally, there was the formation of a bourgeois party, and that was known as Kuomintang Party by Dr. Sanyat Sen. And finally, he brought a nationalist movement in 1912. So at that time, you can say Manchu dynasty was ruling in China. So Manchus were brought on its knees, and finally the Manchus government was replaced by a Republican government in China in 1912. So earlier Dr. Sanyat Sen ruled as the president, and after Sanyat Sen, his successor was Chiang Kai-shek. But neither Sannyase nor Chiang Kai-shek could solve the problem of China. China was still subjected to the exploitation of Western powers. It was during the critical juncture there was the rise of Communist Party of China under a very fiery leader Mao Zedong, what you know as Mao Zedong. So under the fiery leader Mao Zedong, you can see in 1921 there was the formation of Communist Party in China. Even previous year, you people might have observed there was the centenary year of 2021 for the centenary year of the Communist Party of China, and there was a very large celebration in China, and China with much fanfare celebrated the century, the centenary year of the Communist Party. So in 1921 there was the formation of the Communist Party. But here I have to inform you, if you will have the knowledge of, and definitely you may have knowledge of Indian history, so there was the formation of Communist Party in India as well. Both the Communist parties were formed simultaneously. But Indian Communist Party could not get success. It remained confused and confounded to what policies should be adopted in context of peasants and workers. It could not make a compromise even with the caste system in India. It could not chalk out any pragmatic strategy which could have been much suited to Indian condition. But the situation of China was radically different. So one of the reasons behind the success of Mao Zedong or Mao Zedong, you know, that was he chalked out his policy toward the specific, you know, condition of China itself. So that's why you will know there is a question of the Marxist party, the Marxist government in China. But very few people know about this phenomena. In fact, Marxist model of Russia, that of China, that of Vietnam, that of North Korea, and apart from, you can say, the model of Eastern Europe, Cuba, all are slightly different from each other. But China should be given the credit. It developed its local model of communism, and this local model of communism proved more effective today even than the original Marxist-Leninist model of Soviet Russia. So here pay attention to this phenomena, then you will be clear. Here I have used the term Marxism and Communism and Mao Zedong and signification of Marxism. Signification of Marxism means that actually Lenin and Marx, I'm going to draw your attention towards some Marxist ideology first. Actually, Karl Marx was prejudiced against peasants. Here I have to inform you, suppose if you are an officer, or you can say as a man, you might have just gone to attend some theater, and there some pickpocketer has stole away your money. So after that, being an officer, you will form an idea in every theater there most of the people are pickpocketer. The same happened in case of Karl Marx himself. Karl Marx was eyewitness of the revolution of 1830s, or the revolution of particularly 1848. So there he came to realize that the workers and peasants both formed joint front against the bourgeoisie government and both started revolution. But once the objective of peasants was fulfilled, and in some of the areas there was the abolition of feudalism, so peasants simply came out from the revolution and left the workers to the mercy of the government and the mercy of the bourgeois class. And later, the bourgeois class, just finding the proletariat class or the working class as alone, made benefit from the situation and crushed the revolution with iron hand. So after this incident, Karl Marx came to realize that no, peasants could never be a true proletariat, because peasants were owning the private property, they were owning the land. So they could never be a true proletariat. If you have to find out true proletariat, so that is simply the working class who was nothing to lose, workers of the world unite. So in 1848, it was in Communist Manifesto, he gave the slogan, workers of the world unite, you are nothing to lose except the chains of sorrow. मतलब आपके पास खोने के लिए कुछ भी नहीं है सिवा दुखों की श्रृंखला के, और जितने भी वर्कर्स हैं वो यूनाइट हो जाएं. So you will find such a slogan given by Karl Marx. So why? Because Karl Marx was convinced about the fact that in true sense peasants could never be a revolutionary. So better to leave peasants and keep them away. अब now question arises कि the same idea was inherited by Lenin from Karl Marx, and Lenin also were treating the workers as the true revolutionary and peasants simply as the subordinate force. So my students, here I have to inform you कि when Mao Zedong he came to deal with the workers in China, so Mao Zedong realized कि in fact China in particularly and Asia as a whole never up to this period not underwent, except Japan, no Asian country underwent a phase of industrialization. So there the number of workers was few and far between. I mean, total population, the you can say the proportion of industrial workers might have been 1 or 2%, but the proportion of peasants might have been 85% and 90%. So is it wise to organize a revolution on the basis of working class while neglecting peasants, which was the main force in China or in any other Asian country? It is here Mao Zedong just diverted from, or you can say Mao Zedong just, you can say, started to chalk out a separate path in China, and he declared in 1927, taking experience from this incident, in 1927, he declared that in China, true proletariat is the peasants, not workers. He gave peasants the first status as proletariat, and he also declared that in China, whatever revolution had to take place, the revolution had to move from not urban to rural areas, rather vice versa. Means that any revolution had to be organized in rural areas, and it is from rural to urban it has to move. It does not mean that it will move from urban to rural. In this way, you can say he tried to prove that no, in China, peasants are the true revolutionaries, they are true proletariat, and in future all the revolution had to be organized on this basis. So here I have told you that peasants as proletariat, peasant nationalism, in the basis of Chinese nationalism would be peasant nationalism, and final Chinese version of communism. This is the Chinese version of communism, and China has chalked out a separate path from that of Russia. It created some sort of differences between Russia and China later, you come to know, because China was not the blind follower of Russian model. China developed its own model itself. In this way, my students and viewers, I have used the term Mao Zedong and signification of Marxism. It was signification of Marxism. And then after 1927, you can say Mao Zedong started to organize the peasants, and the main force, Jiangxi province was its base. From Jiangxi, it has to move to Shenxi province, and finally, you can say it could create a big militia of peasants. 10 lakh soldiers were organized among peasants, and he came to realize that in the China, the true revolution is the people's war. So, my students, here I have to inform you, up to between 1937 to 1945. There was much ups and downs in the national life of China, because this period is marked by the severe Japanese invasion on China. That was the first factor. Secondly, you can say in 1941, when Japan invaded American naval base Pearl Harbor, and then you can say Japan jumped into the Second World War. So Chinese-Japanese war became the part of the Second World War itself. In this way, you can say that this war was going to be severe after 1937 onwards. So national government under Chiang Kai-shek had to fight against Chinese with American help. And during this period, Mao Zedong could expand its communist base in China, making benefit from the situation of the foreign invasions, because as the result of the foreign invasions, the national government had to make a retreat in a particular region, and when the vacuum was created, the Communist Party used to fill up the vacuum. In this way, you can say that the whole process was going on. And up to 1945, when Japan was on the verge of making surrender, up to this period, the Communist Party of China could have regained too much power and strength, So finally, in 1945, when Japan made a surrender and evacuated the Chinese region, so a civil war started between Chiang Kai-shek party, that is Kuomintang party, and Communist Party of China. Even USA didn't extend uh, expected support to the capitalist government of Chiang Kai-shek, because USA was apprehensive about the fact that in that case, Soviet Russia might stand beside the Communist Party, and there would be some ugly scene would be created in China. Even USA avoided giving or extending direct support to Communist Party, Kuomintang Party of China. Finally, in 1949, this war was concluded, and it was a great success of Mao Zedong, because Kuomintang party was owning 40 lakh soldiers and Communist party or Mao Zedong was owning simply 10 lakh soldiers. But with the people's support, he could win this civil war, and finally Chiang Kai-shek was expelled from the mainland of China, and today what you know as Taiwan. So that became a refuge for the Kuomintang party and Chiang Kai-shek. So there was a division between Taiwan and China. At that time, Mao Zedong might have moved towards Taiwan as well, but it was the time USA gave a nuclear umbrella to Taiwan, nuclear protection to Taiwan, and gave warning to China. China should not dare to encroach the region of Taiwan. In this way, you can say China remained divided between the. So this is the time period. This was the case. So my students here, my students and viewers here, I have to inform you. In this way, Mao Zedong could have created a communist government in China. All the communist government in the world was having a single feature: there should be an autocratic rule, there should be a Politburo, a central committee, and all the powers would be concentrated into a coterie of the people, a caucus of the leaders, and the common people would be deprived from the democratic process. That became a common feature. In the name of dictatorship proletariat, all the communist government all over the world could establish an autocratic government. But in spite of the fact, you may realize one thing: the Chinese communist government was different in that sense. In other regions of the world, you will come to realize that the communist rule had to be established by a guerrilla group from above, or with Russian support, a group of the, discipline, the volunteers from above. But in case of China, you will properly find there a popular movement, and through popular movement and the peasant support, a communist government might have been established in China. So case of China was radically different from that of the other regions. In this way, now there appeared the era of Mao Zedong. You may ask me the question, now Mao Zedong era 1949 to 1976. You may ask me the question, why I have carried you to the past of China, to the vagaries of history of China, why I have preferred to carry you to this stage. My students and viewers, it was due to the fact that, in fact, so far as you will not observe the model of Mao Zedong and his successors like Deng Xiaoping, Hu Jintao, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, you cannot do justice to why Xi Jinping and what developments have taken place in China under Xi Jinping. It was, a dangerous signal to China and the world. So in order to understand this phenomena, you have to pay attention to the policy of the previous president and the General Secretary of Communist Party in China. So after that, Mao Zedong once came to power. So you can divide Mao Zedong in two parts. That is better for you. Mao Zedong as a revolutionary who could organize a communist movement in China, and Mao Zedong as the head of the government in China. As the head of the government, he became too much arrogant, too much headstrong, and he started to doing experimentation in China. His economic policy also turned to be a big failure. So Mao Zedong became a headache for Chinese people in one sense after freedom. So far as the revolutionary, he was a boon for China, because without the pragmatic strategy of Mao Zedong, you can never explain the success of Communist Party in China. But as the ruling class, Mao Zedong, and as the head of the ruling party, Mao Zedong was headache for the common Chinese people. Now here you can take the example, because history of China is in whether Chinese people are going to accept or you are going to accept or not, but history of China or history of any communist government in the world was deeply associated with the policy of Soviet Russia as well. In 1953, you might have heard about a Soviet dictator, or you can say a communist leader in Soviet Union. You might have heard the name of Stalin. You might have definitely heard the name of Stalin. So Stalin was a completely autocratic, even slightly more autocratic than Mao Zedong, you can say. Or it is very difficult to decide who appeared to be more autocratic, whether Mao Zedong or Stalin. But in 1953, Stalin passed away. His successor was Nikita Khrushchev. And Nikita Khrushchev was a great critic of Stalin. So in the history of communist world, it was just like a thunder in the communist world. After the death of Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev appeared in public to criticize his policy and declared that what was wrong with the government of Stalin. It was stunning to the communist world all over the world, because in Communist Party discipline was a very major factor, and the you can say movement by this Nikita Khrushchev was a signal to all the autocratic government in communist world. So even Mao Zedong took it as a ringing bell. It is better for us, we have to modify our policy, otherwise even our successors will treat me in the same manner. So firstly, he followed one policy that is called 100 Flowers Movement, 1956-1957. He declared that he let hundreds of flowers bloom, and let hundreds of school of thought content. मतलब सैकड़ों फूलों को खिलने दो और सैकड़ों विचारधाराओं को पनपने दो. You are talking about the freedom of ideology. It was definitely a very radical thing, because even Russia and Nikita Khrushchev was alarmed at his speech. Because in this way, if the communist world, the people might have demanded the freedom of ideas, so the whole communist system all over the world might have collapsed, because it was with the support of Iron Hand, the communist government were ruling. And he started to talk in terms of 100 flowers movement, and the let 100 flowers bloom, and let 100 schools of thought contained. It was definitely a dangerous signal to the communist world. But anyway, because he was worried about the fact, in 1956, Khrushchev has made a criticism of Stalin. So it was just a warning to him. So he modified his policy. But after 1958, some idea came to his mind, and he did a very wrong economic experiment, very devastating economic experiment. You might have heard about the Great Leap Forward policy. What is the Great Leap Forward policy? So up to 1956 and 57, he has organized all the land into, he successfully did the collectivization of land. Collectivization of land means private property in land was eliminated, and the land of peasants were collectivized. Means the peasants had to do the cultivation in the very collective manner, and the income had to be distributed. And the second one factor was that Mao Zedong decided that China had to export the grains in order to give a boost to economy. So this was the one factor. Secondly, he also tried to give the extra burden on peasants. The peasants had to develop some sort of, blast furnaces behind his. Blast furnaces means, some smaller factory, some smaller iron factory behind their house. Behind their house, they had to run some smaller workshop of iron and steel workshop, and they had to carry the agriculture as well. But as the grains were forcefully collected from the peasants, because a part of grains had to be exported elsewhere, so the grain requirement of peasants could not be fulfilled, because a part of grains were diverted to exports. So there was the scarcity of grains, and in 1950s, China had to face the devastating famine. Nearly 40 lakh people passed away due to the impact of famine. It was the time India was not self-sufficient from the viewpoint of grains, but India under PL 480, India used to collect the grains from USA 40 lakh, 10 lakh, ton per annum, and in this way he used to collect the grains from USA on the basis of PL 480 assistance. And in this way, the Indian government could save their people, but Chinese government could not save their people. Rather, due to this fallacious policy, and faulty policy, nearly 40 lakh Chinese passed away, and they had to face the situation of death. So, that's, that you can say the famine became a very common feature of Chinese life. So he was being criticized. Now Mao Zedong was worried. Chinese people might have make a revolt against me, and the criticism of Communist Party started, criticism of Mao Zedong policy started. So as a safety measure, he started a new revolution that is known as Cultural Revolution. My students and viewers, I have given a date for Cultural Revolution 1966 to 69. But some scholars believe that no, up to 1976, Mao Zedong survived. So up to 1976, this movement could have been carried on directly or indirectly. But its heyday of this cultural revolution was 3 years between 1966 to spring of 1969. What is cultural revolution? He tried to make a socialist man in China. Every man in China should accept the socialist ideology. So he believed that in fact the bourgeois ideology is infesting in China, and bourgeois ideology is influencing the Chinese people, Chinese mind, Chinese psyche. It is better to create a socialist man in China. He started the propaganda of his ideology, this Mao Zedong, and in order to give support to his propaganda of his ideology, he has coined the term that is bourgeois culture revolution. Matlab, you have to eliminate the bourgeois ideology from China and you have to create a socialist man. But in the name of cultural revolution, he targeted his rivals, targeted his enemies, and lakhs of people were eliminated in China. It was just like, you can see, the Great Purge. Great Purge means ki रास्ते से हटा देना. So it was just like, you can say, it was just like a great purge, and thousands people were just taken away. They were sent somewhere to do the work. Some of them were killed, and even the people were encouraged by the government to target their enemy. So in this way, it was really a very pathetic condition in China under Mao Zedong. And finally, China could have been free from this cruel dictator in 1976 when he died. And then there was the rise of a new leader. So I have to make you clear about the new leader. So Deng Xiaoping, just observe here, this is Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping was once a sufferer himself, because at the time of Mao Zedong, he was also thrown out somewhere. He was given partial punishment and he was just eliminated from the ruling group, and he was, you can say, just exiled, you can say. So he was in a situation of exilement for a longer time. And then after the death of Mao Zedong, and even during his lifetime, his return process started. And finally, after Mao Zedong, there is a very long story, but I have not to get the whole story diverted in this direction, because that will just like, you can say, aberration from my main topic. Otherwise, I could have mentioned about his personal story about Deng Xiaoping as well. So Deng Xiaoping, he came to power. My students and viewers, here I have to realize that Deng Xiaoping was in true sense. It is very difficult. Sometime you come to realize that even today you might have heard about some of the critics who were in favor of economic renaissance. So you might have heard one thing, some are having the praise for Jawaharlal Nehru, and at least some intellectuals in India today who are even praising Narasimha Rao slightly more than Jawaharlal Nehru. Why? Because he started the policy of economic liberalization. Same happened in China. Here you come to know that Deng Xiaoping, in 1979, he opened the economy of China. And China, which was a deficient economy, which today had emerged to be the second largest economy in the world. So that is the role of Deng Xiaoping. I'm just recalling in my very childhood, whenever I was in primary school. So at that time, I used to say, or I have been taught by my teacher, that the economic condition was, India was slightly better than that of China. Means that China was supposed to be poorer even than India at that time. but that China emerged to be the second largest economy. It was possible due to the role of Deng Xiaoping. He opened the economy, and not simply opened the economy. He was a great tactician. He came to realize that if China had to grow, so China needs the support of USA. And here I have to inform you, slightly I have to make an aberration, or slightly I have to divert from this course, then I will make you clear. Actually, background for the, you can say, rapprochement between USA and China started already in 1970s. What happened? So Soviet Russia and China developed a sense of difference with each other, because China has started its own way of revolution. It was going to upset, Soviet Russia, Then after Stalin, there came Khrushchev, at Nikita Khrushchev. So in the Nikita Khrushchev and Mao Zedong, the larger differences appeared, particularly a border clash, a border issue started between Russia and China in 1969 at Ussuri River. And China was in the old habit, as it did in case of India. So China tried to encroach even Russian border. But Russia was, you can say, much more than China, and Russia was definitely, you can say, much more powerful than China. So China could not disturb Russia, and finally, Russia could counter invade China, and on this border, it just pushed China within the border and reflected its military strength. So China, having been beaten by Russia, so finally China started to make a rapprochement with USA, and it was the time there was a very great diplomat of America, you might have heard the name, that is Henry Kissinger. So Henry Kissinger started subtle diplomacy, and he visited China secretly and made Nixon, American president, to visit China. So there was the rapprochement between, there was, you can say, the new friendship between China and USA, and this happened in 1971, and it was a golden opportunity for Pakistan as well. And for your kind information, Pakistan here played the role of a mediator between China and USA at that time, and presently China is playing the mediation, doing the mediation between Pakistan and USA. But at that time, Pakistan was doing mediation between China and USA. And finally, the process started. But after the passing away, after the death of Mao Zedong, when there was the rise of Deng Xiaoping, so Deng Xiaoping truly tried to exploit the relations with Chinese-American relationship. In true sense, he tried to how to economically exploit the relations between USA and China. So Deng Xiaoping gave a slogan at that time. He just, he hide your strength and bide your time. Hide your strength means China should not follow the aggressive policy, because already Chinese and Indian war, it has already taken place in 1962. Then China invaded Vietnam in, I think, in 1975, 76. So after that, Deng Xiaoping modified his policy, and he tried to maintain the low profile, so that the other world powers should not take China as a dangerous, you can say, contender for power. And he gave the slogan, hide your strength and bide your time. And then he started to cajole USA and Western party to provide help to China. And with the support of USA, it has even got the membership of UNO. Earlier it is remained to be deprived from the membership for a long time. And then in 2001, he also got opportunity to be the member of WTO. It became the WTO member, IMF members, and you can say in this way, China started to improve its economy. At that time, USA was having its own motive. USA came to believe that China, that is the quite, resourceful country. It was having the larger natural resources. So China could have been a better and could have been the green pasture and very preferred destination for investors in USA. So that will help USA to gain economic benefit from China. But China is having its own calculation. With the support of USA, we have to develop the technology, we have to develop the industries, we have to develop and modernize our economy, and then we have to surpass all the countries. It was having its own secret planning. In this way, China was gradually growing and growing, And at the time of the three presidents, you can say, and all of the three were the secretary of Communist Party as well, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao. So China maintained the balance and concentrated over improving the economy, and now it became the second largest economy in the world. And now it was in a position even to give challenge to USA. So this was the case. Now comes the turn of this man, this strong man, that is Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping has reversed the old policy. It even started to pick quarrels with USA directly. It has started aggressive policy on various fronts, In 2013, actually in 1978, this was the time period of Deng Xiaoping, who remained on the post up to 1989. Then in 1929-23, you can say that there was the arrival of Jiang Zemin, and he remained on the post up to 2003. And from 2002 to 2012, it was Hu Jintao who remained to be the president as well as the general secretary of China. And it was in early 2013 there was the advent of Xi Jinping as the Chinese president and the secretary of Communist Party. So here my point is that it was at the time of Mao Zedong, there was no restriction over the tenure and time period up to how long a president could grace his post. But between 1982 and 2018, at the time of Deng Xiaoping himself, there was a rule. The time period for president, or you can say the head of the Chinese government, should not exceed 10 years. So there was some, restriction over the time period or the tenure. But in 2013, Xi Jinping became the president, and then in 2018 itself, when there was in 2017, there was the 19th session of this Communist Party, and it was here he decided in 2018 this your limitations of the two tenure had to be removed finally, and it was in this session, you can say, in 2020, finally you can say the curve which was given on the time period for the president, which that has been finally removed, and he became once again came to grace this post third time, and in future he emerged to be such a strong man that now it is widely believed that so far as he will alive, he will try to remain on the post, what is the case today in Russia of Vladimir Putin. This is, you can say, this is just a conjecture of the scholars. It is the situation, a situation will come, he will not leave his post, he will not bid farewell to his power and position till his death. So this is the case, but in future, once again, he will remove the situation, he will create such a situation. Today, he is everything in China. Now the question arises, the policy which had earlier been followed by three presidents, so this policy has been reversed by Xi Jinping now. And he is now showing his muscular power to the world, and he was also putting restriction over, you can say, Chinese people, more and more restriction. Here I have to inform one thing, one point is missing, so I have to repeat here. Deng Xiaoping, when he started liberalization, so he introduced a system. The system is known as market socialism. Market socialism means you are not going to leave the autocratic communist model, but we are just in economic field, we have to follow the capitalist model. We try to make a marriage between the two different models, capitalism and the autocratic government of socialism. And it was at the time of Deng Xiaoping. At that time, I was myself a student. I am recalling the case when Deng Xiaoping came to power, and the wind of change started in communist world at that time. The change in Soviet Russia, in East European countries, the decline of socialist government in East European countries. So that was definitely, you can say, encouraging for Chinese students, and Chinese students gathered on 4th May 1989 in order to give the demonstration on the May 4th day, and simultaneously to create the pressure over the government that the Chinese government should also give essential political freedom to the Chinese people, which was at that time being given by other socialist and communist governments in East European countries and Soviet Russia. Gorbachev, etc. You might have heard the name. So Deng Xiaoping sent the tank and army to crush the students' movement. So whole world criticized his step. At that time, Deng Xiaoping, this step was criticized all over the world, but he shown muscular power and gave direct signal to the Chinese people, I will provide you the economic liberalization, but you have to accept my autocratic government. There would be no compromise on this model. So the same happens in this case, you know. So this model was followed by Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, because the government could never be democratic. Now, particularly after this Xi Jinping has emerged to be the second Mao. His ideology was prevailing in China, and now some critic has even coined the term second cultural revolution under him. So now in the last one, I have raised the issue of what happened in China. Because when the economic liberalization started in China and USA was extending economic support to China, at that time there was conjecture and there was a prophecy. Once China had to move on the path of economic liberalization, so China definitely relax its political control as well, and the people will come to enjoy the essential economic freedom. But it didn't become the case. You know, case is quite opposite. Even after following the policy of economic liberalization, China could not open its economy at all, open its political structure at all, and the people are not enjoying the political freedom. And today, the worst of all is that China became an enemy to democracy. And just parallel to the democratic model in the world, China has to develop and China has to make a propaganda in favor of its own model. He discard political freedom or neglect political freedom and enjoy economic prosperity. If this Chinese model had to be successful, it will be a big danger to the democracy in future as well. But in the last but not the least, I have raised the issue, what will happen now? I have raised the issue, would China emerge to be number one power or would Chinese model collapse? Because Xi Jinping is moving in the direction as if in future, China is likely to topple USA as the supreme economic power in the world and supreme military power as well. But supreme military or economic power, China had to emerge to be, or Chinese model had to collapse. It is simply time had to decide what will happen. Whether Chinese model of development had to collapse or whether China had to emerge to be the supreme power in the world. But recently you might have found that what happened in real estate in China, in what way you can say the Chinese economy was facing a large deficit of $3 trillion, and in what way the real estate sector is on the point of getting collapsed. And my students and viewers, I have to share one idea with you. In 1990, 89, 90, when Soviet Russia, suddenly in 1991, Soviet Russia collapsed at that time. So as a student, I myself was shocked and surprised because up to 1991, Soviet Russia could never give a sign that Soviet Russia was on the verge of getting economic collapse or the Soviet Russia might have fragment into different 15 parts. It was never giving signal. And even in 1990, Soviet Russia emerged to be slightly more powerful than USA, but suddenly you were shocked at the demise of USSR. It is not a matter of surprise that someday will come to know that Chinese model of development has collapsed. The Chinese people has come on the road. They have made a revolt against the government. If such will happen, it is not a matter of surprise for us. So just like you can say Bollywood movie, you can say the villain has to be, the fate of the villain is normally decided in the last scene. So same happens in case of any nation. Any nation means ki, you know, ki your model is successful or failure, you are either hero or villain. So the last scene of the movie is going to decide. The same happened in the case here also. So my students and viewers, I'm stopping here, and as I have promised you, if from time to time I will just bring a various sorts of program. Thank you very much. I'll see you later.